Right. So why? The question of the day. In my experience, it's such a small and large word, probably the biggest word in the English language that we have, because it just covers so many different things that doesn't really have any answers for. I've always really liked in Spanish. I took Spanish a lot in high school, and I enjoyed the why is porque, which really means for what, but that the answer is also porque, which is because. So I always enjoyed the why and because are the same phrase, the answer to its own question. I feel like why is the question that we come to churches to find out. The why we meditate, why we follow these spiritual practices of any kind is to try to get to the why of what we're doing here at all. The purpose, I suppose, is what we're searching for. Someone told me recently that sometimes we confuse why with how. Uh, Equally interesting questions that have loose fitting answers that vary from person to person. So each of us can only really answer our own why. Why am I here? Why am I at all? Why do I exist? I really get stuck on the sensation sometimes that I am literally just a skeleton inside the skin, powered by enough electricity to power a light bulb. Gray matter that works even though we can, with words, denote why, but it's really just semantics and symbolism to discuss something that we really don't have a very good grip on understanding of. Why is the question that you could endlessly ask and endlessly answer different things to. People are going to disagree and agree on different things of it. It's one of those things about philosophy is that there's really no end to be come to about it. It's just one of those, I guess, thought games. But it seems to perplex us. It seems to be the reason that we gather, the reason that we have these discussions at all, is because everyone wants to know, why are we here? What are we doing? What is the purpose of all of this? Answers that we don't get in this lifetime, no matter how hard we search and how often we may talk about it. I really don't think it's something that we get to know here on this plane. My sincerest hope is that the afterlife is something like an aha moment. Maybe you get the punchline and we can finally see what it is that this was all supposed to accomplish. I think a lot of us end up in this sort of existential woe about it because we just are so desperate to understand why. And then when we don't, we just go back to doing, the rigmarole of the daily life. We go to work, we do our things, and we make that our purpose. But we always each come back to this internal longing for more than that. And I think that's because we know that we're all here to do more than that. I think that each one of you has had an inkling in your life of a larger scheme for yourself, something that maybe you can just feel the edges of what it is you came here to do. A lot. We think that it's supposed to be this big thing to do, a doing, perhaps. It's come to me in my own intuition that it's not. It's a being. It's a way of just existing. That existence is in and of itself enough. And that is why we are here. We are here to exist and to experience and to do this all together. The closest that I've come to my own version of interpretation of a God is almost like that we are all a part of it. Almost like I don't know, if you could picture like a crystal that has all these different facets to it and all these different faces, It's one thing, but each individual piece of it is a different side. To me, it explains how God can be omnipotent and everywhere at once, and all encompassing, because it literally is everything, experiencing itself. They talk about the oneness that we all either came from or are going back to. And I see that would be dull and uneventful. And so we split ourselves into a billion different pieces to experience all that existing has to offer, the good and the bad. When we're unaware that that's what we came here to do, then we can suffer and we can get stuck in it and we can go, well, why all of this? But when we can step out of that for just a minute to see just a larger version of, gosh, the incredible beings that each one of you are, that each one of everyone on this planet is, and every tree and every grain of sand and every piece of this experience. And that's just on this one planet, let alone in the entire universe, The true magnificence, the true just awe-inspiring everything that is. I feel like that's why we constantly ask why questions, because we want to put those things into words. We want to say, well, if we can't define it, then we can't experience it. But that's not true. I think stepping away from trying to define it and stepping away from labeling every experience we're having in congruence to that, then, you take a deep breath and a walk in the woods, and you understand beyond words and beyond thought for just a second. You get it. You get maybe what you came here to do, or the why of you. But then we think about it and we logic it and we, mold it around in our little gray matter electricity box here, and then we subvert it. We make it less than what it is because we've put it now into an English language, into something that we think that we can comprehend, the incomprehensible. I say often that we seem to be constantly trying to F the ineffable, but that's impossible. Otherwise, it wouldn't be ineffable. So the why of why I'm here is really the only thing that I can ever speak of. I know that I am here to be a way shower and a catalyst. And sometimes that is difficult, and that can get in my own way of like living the human life that I'm here living, doing the job, and trying to make friends and being a people pleaser, as I have often been wont to do. Being a catalyst does not jive well with that. It is often out of my control too. I can stand up here and talk to you guys and hope that something that I say resonates. But I find it's often in the really happenstance, off the cuff conversations that I have that I'm not really thinking about. Well, someone will come to me later and go, what you said changed my whole life. And I'll go, oh, geez, it was when I wasn't even trying that I catalyzed a change in somebody else by just being. My why is to exist, and I try to do that better all the time. But by trying to do it, I'm not doing it, because it's it's not an action word. It's I don't know. We are each a verb, I suppose. We are doing by being all the time. Because even when you're just sitting there, you're still breathing, you're still processing, you're still moving electricity and blood through your system, On a physical level, I guess why we're here is to be a generator. I mean, you're born and your heart starts beating, and it doesn't stop until it stops, and that's your own personal generator you're walking around with in your chest. The fact that we've taken those things so for granted that we don't really even think about the processes that can make our muscles move, or our words speak out of our tongues. I don't have to like sit here and think too much about making a sound and in a way that you all will understand it. These whys are just common. We don't think about them anymore because, I don't know, maybe you did when you were a baby and you were learning how to language, but then you grow up and it's just how things are. I think a lot of the why of why we're all here is to change things up. I think that this is an unprecedented time in human history. For the first time, I feel like in all of human existence, we are most encouraged to be who we are, to be individualists, to express ourselves. We're not, in this country at least, like locked up or murdered or, shied against that. If anything, in this time and age, for the very first time in human history, everybody gets to be themselves. And that's new. And I think a lot of people don't know what that means. They don't know why they are or who they are or what they are to some extenses. I mean, we can all agree on a lot of things. We're meat and tissue, and we're sentient, and we're here. But past that, I think there's a larger experience to be had internally. We're talking about A Course in Miracles, and I do enjoy things like Saint Germain and these different the Kabbalion and these different theologies. Ishmael is a book that I highly recommend. That's a similar sort of vein. The Secret, all these sorts of like new age but old information ideas about like that you are the creator of your own universe, that your thoughts are real, tangible things that shape your reality. And that when we are aware of that and we do that consciously or just a little bit intentionally, then you get to I don't know, like steer the course of the ship down the river. Like you don't get to control where the river goes, but you can at least, stop throwing logs in your way by saying, oh, that's not real, or that's not true, or that's not right. Because those are all arbitrary word symbol complexes that that are very individualized. Ishmael is a good book that I recommend because it talks about culture. A lot of the beliefs that we have about ourselves are culturally ingrained. You didn't believe these things about yourself. For instance, if someone told you that you were stupid or crazy or, I don't know, not right from a young age, or let's say weird. I got told I was weird a lot from a very young age. So here I am. I never would have told myself that. I was happy in my existence, and then someone came along and said, here, wear this hat because that's you. And I said, okay, because I was still learning from the people around me. It's interesting that all the information that you have is hearsay. Very little of it came from your own internal experiences. So much of it was either taught to you or told to you or that you picked up along the way and then just said, well, this is like my outfit of facts. I will wear this now. And then that became who I was. So I had this weird hat on and I wore it all the time. And so then I started saying, well, I'm weird. And then I limited myself because of this label that had been handed to me. It wasn't until I was a young adult that I realized that I now had the authority to take any of those garments off that I wanted. That it was only, nobody was coming and telling me those things anymore. I was perpetuating those own things as to why I was the way that I was and why I was sad, for instance, well, because I'm weird. Well, and then one day I said, well, who am I to tell myself that? Who first told me that anyway? And why did I trust their authority so much to believe their facts about me as my own facts? So I realized at that point that we then get to pick and choose, that like growing up is an amalgamation of data. And then at some point you have no choice but to sift through it and go, what's actually valuable to my experience and what should I let go? Easier said than done, of course, because we value those things. They're almost like treasures that we hold on to, like they're truths, but they're not, they're opinions. And you can choose to continue that opinion or you can let it go. So at some point I had to take off that hat because it wasn't serving me anymore. It was holding me back from the idea of why I was here and who I was and what I was doing. And then I found more buttons that I was wearing about, not enoughness or, not being good or, being flawed in this or that way. Those were things that I at some point had to take those out of the story I was telling about myself, because at the end of the day, you're writing your own story. Everyone's the hero of their own story, but nobody gets to write yours except you. But culture has really taught us that there is a set way that story goes, especially American culture, because what I think is interesting in a lot of other countries, they don't have this good guy, bad guy dynamic in their storytelling that we have in our books and our movies and our general like entertainment sort of ways that we've also carried into how we view each other. That, well, if someone's disagrees with you, well, then they're against you and you're the good guy and they're the bad guy. But they're the hero in their own story, and that may be the same of you. But at the end of the day, there is no such thing as good or bad. Like, nobody's, in my opinion, evil. We're just, hurt people trying to figure out how to heal ourselves and stop hurting each other in the meantime, I believe. So, howdy. So, why is an endless topic that we can talk on. It's so funny. It's just a 3-letter word, but it's so encompassing. So why am I here? I'm here a lot to talk. I really enjoy talking, and it's how I process a lot of my own experiences as to communicating through with others. Because if I'm just sitting alone at home quietly, I don't get to, I can think myself in a circle, but I won't get very far as progress goes. So why am I here? I'm here to discuss and talk to y'all about it. Because I am certainly not any authority other than unto myself. I think a difference in me too in the last 10 years is that I trust my own internal knowledge. Is anyone familiar with the term epigenetics? Epigenetics is the idea that we pass down knowledge through our DNA. And so, and they found this true. There's studies like the 100th monkey experiment where they've now done enough research to know that information, it gets passed down in our DNA through our generations. So epigenetics is the idea that trauma can be passed down through our genes, and until someone is aware enough to do something about it, instead of just playing out the same patterning that you've always been playing out in your family line, until somebody says, oh, I'm going to take a note of this and do the healing and the purging that needs to happen, then you get to stop that from passing down through the next generation. And that's, that that inner work. That I worked at a school for girls that I was really grateful for that experience, because to see the validity of the fact that just talking and listening and really working through the emotions and the physical sensations of the body, how much progress you can make in your own internal experience. That, for instance, if you're holding pain in your heart and your parents had heart degenerative diseases and their parents had heart degenerative diseases, well, that might be saying that somewhere along the line, somebody wasn't loved. And then now that's passed down as a burden that, like, until you can figure out how to maybe love yourself or love others, that you're just going to keep passing that down, you know? That your emotions and your physical sensations are all communications, you trying to communicate with you, you know? As a young person dealing with sadness and anger, I had to at some point realize this, that they were not for naught. It was not that I was broken, or as I had been instructed that I was, or that I was, flawed. It was, I was desperately trying to communicate with myself and tell myself when things weren't right, or when I was uncomfortable with situations, you know? And it wasn't until I was an adult that I could then find those things as pains that had manifested in my body and say, oh, to take a second to go, hi, self, what is this trying to tell me? What are you trying to communicate with me? And sure enough, it was always like a little kid version of me when I would just sit in silence for a minute. A lot of times they would come in like a mass. So they would come as like some scary monster thing. And I'd be like, oh, and just, I would give them love anyway, in the imagination of your mind. Because here's the thing, your imagination is the greatest tool any of us have been given. And we are really flippant with that. They're like, oh, it's just in your imagination. No, the fact that you can vividly hallucinate like anything that you want in any, like I can talk about a purple elephant and a top hat, and in some aspect you now have a purple elephant and a top hat in your head. The fact that we can do that with each other, and that you can at any time just like conjure up a vision in your mind's eye. This is what I mean when I'm talking about that space that I go. I'm not saying that I'm like on a trip or something. I'm saying in my imagination, I just sit for a second and I say, hey, I had a pain in my chest. Hey, chest, what is this trying to communicate with me? And to just sit in silence, with my eyes closed for a minute. And in my mind's eye came this scary shadow thing. I was like, well, I know that you're a part of me, so I send love even to you. Because I could be fearful and I could shut this experience down. But just for the sake of argument, what's it going to hurt? I give you love too. I love you. What are you here to tell me? And it almost like took it off like a mask, and it was a 5-year-old version of me. Just saying, I was just uncomfortable and I just wanted you to acknowledge me all this time, and it still gets me because it was just me after all these years. Because how often do you just sit in silence with yourself? How often do you just take a moment to really just be in awe of the fact of like every version of you've ever been, from a fetus to a baby to a child, and everything that you've picked up and everything you've experienced along the way, all the way to the person you are today, the person you were yesterday, the person you're going to be. I mean, think back a year, 5 years, 10 years. Like, you were a person in all of those times, and you are the culmination of who all of those yous were. But within you, genetically, all of those yous still exist. And sometimes some of those yous are carrying things along in you that you don't know that you're carrying on to. So if you have any discomfort in your body that's like a recurring thing, I challenge you to sit down and just pinpoint that spot and say, what am I trying to tell myself? And just allow a space to just see what comes up. What harm could it do? What, it's going to waste like 2 minutes, 5 tops, 10 if you really get into it. Once I found these inner children, I was then able to say, well, I'm acknowledging you. I love you. Even you. I would have this space in my mind where they could come to me and I could just embrace them and hug them back into me. For a long time in my early 20s, I felt like I had disassociated in all these different versions of myself. Because when I was in high school, they told me I was crazy. And so I took that hat and wore it and almost ran with it. I said, well, if I am, then I am. And that's who they tell me I am, so I'm going to be that. And so I had segmented my personality into a bunch of different versions of myself. So I spent the last several years reabsorbing all those selves into me, because it's all just me communicating with me. It was all just a coping skill to deal with existence, which is what we all have in different ways. We all have different coping skills just to deal with the immensity of what this life is, and the limited scope of understanding that we get about it. So I would say that like emotions and physical sensations are your body trying to clue you in to things that you just need to acknowledge and allow and experience within yourself. Awareness being a really important key. We can't get anywhere until we're at least aware of the sensations and the emotions we're experiencing. And if we're just in the go, go, go hustle of the day, then we won't have much time to go, well, I don't have time to feel this feeling right now. I got to get to where I'm going. Well, you know what? You owe it to yourself. What else are we really doing here? Are we really, is your why here to go to your 9-to-5 job? Or is your why here to be here in your body and to experience what you're experiencing fully? I think you owe that to yourself at least a little bit. If you'd like to. I mean, nobody's required. It's just I think we were talking about A Course in Miracles. I think it's like the next level of like, if you would like to do the next evolutionary stage, it takes a little bit of internal awareness and then a little bit of work. Not much, just a little bit of intention. It goes a long way. So once we're aware of those things that we're experiencing within our emotional body and our physical body, that's where epigenetics really comes in. So not only can we then heal the trauma that's been passed down in our whole ancestral line all the way up to us, not only can we then heal it for the future generations, which is something that you can tangibly do to change the world, like one person at a time, and your own life, which is great, that's good. They say epigenetics is not only the trauma that gets passed down, it's the knowledge that within our DNA, you have the knowledge of all of your ancestors, at least the important things that led to your survival, because in some way your trauma led to your survival too, but we're beyond that. We're not hunter-gatherers anymore. We're not, out there warring each other. We're not surviving. We're physically thriving, but emotionally kind of floundering a little. So now is a lot. So that's the time. Like we've gotten this comfortable enough that we got air-conditioned houses and food in our fridges for days and money to go do anything that we want to do to some extent. We have that so that you can take the time to now do the mental evolution that I think we were always destined to do. I think that's the why of why we're here, at least here and now, is to take that next step internally, take that individual responsibility. I really like this church, but I've had, my past experiences with churches. I won't go into it. It's a long story, and I talked about it last time. But to say that I think a lot of religion takes away your personal responsibility and says, give it all to God. And granted, that's valid. But I think now we have to understand that we are a part of God and that we have to take some individual responsibility for our own lives and our own selves and our own internal experience, because nobody else is having your internal experience. And you could talk until the end of days, and you've lived long enough that you could never have enough words to explain to somebody your internal experience. So here we are all experiencing each other, but nobody's having the experience you're experiencing from your point of view with everything that you've lived and all the data that you've acquired that's very relative to you in your life. That's all very individual. And so then therefore it's our individual responsibility to go through that, to defrag, to rewrite our own story to be the outcome that we want. Because otherwise you're just, I think that's where the victim mentality comes. Because otherwise I often see it like life is a river. And so if you're not at least a little intentional about it and going with the flow and floating a little, well, then you're thrashing and drowning and like splashing about because you don't know if you just to relax, be a little bit intentional about what you're doing, because it's counterintuitive at first to float and go with the flow. I'm not saying any of this is, that's what I meant about culture, like that all of this is counterintuitive to the way that we've been trained, the way that we've been programmed to like what we're doing here is to do it how it's always been done. But I believe the why of us is that we're here to do it differently. I think the most damaging phrase that people can say is that that's how it's always been done. We're here to do it the way that we're here to do it. Otherwise, why would we be so individualistic? Why would we be encouraged in this lifetime to be exactly who you are if it wasn't of some value to the greater whole? There's this whole paradoxical thing that I keep coming to that a lot of the main truths are totally opposite of what you would think they would. The thing of like, if you want to receive, you got to give, and those sort of old adages that are always kind of backwards logic. To change the world, the only way you can do that is to change yourself. And that thereby, when everybody is focusing on their internal environment and evolving that and changing that, I believe that it has a ripple effect and that it will change the world like effortlessly almost. I mean, it's an effort to do it internally, but as long as we keep trying to do it outside of ourselves, we're not going to make a lot of headway. I mean, that's just it's slamming your head against the wall almost. But you have at least 65% of control of your internal environment. What a gift that is. How often do we philander that and say, well, that's just how I am. That's just what I am. But why are you the way that you are? And who gave you all the information that makes up the story of you to begin with? And then who gave them that authority? I mean, we did because we thought that they knew better. Epigenetics says that you have a wealth of knowledge within you that has been painstakingly handed down genetically from everybody who came before you. And that is valid. And that is your intuition. That is your gut knowledge. That is things that you just know and you don't know how you know. How often do you discredit that? How often do you say with your head, well, that's not true because such and such would say so? Or, I can't believe that because I didn't read it in a book or I didn't hear it on TV or somebody else didn't tell me that information. Well, what if you have more information within yourself than the whole rest of the world for you, given that everybody's experience is relative anyway, because everybody's getting different data and picking and choosing through what's what. So why wouldn't you value your own internal guidance system? Because we've been taught not to. We've been taught to doubt ourselves. Louise Hay is one of my favorite authors. She has this book, Heal Your Body Now, and so she does a lot with affirmations, so I am statements. There's a whole religion based on the I amers that say, I am is the most powerful thing that you can possibly say, and anything else that comes after that is like like a magic spell, incantation to say, I am blank, then it is so, what is it? Abracadabra translated means I speak it, therefore it is, something like that, roughly translated. Abracadabra is, so I speak it, so it is what that means. So as far back as we were talking about magic, we were saying your words create your reality. Your thoughts come first because you got to think it before you can say it. But then what we say is literally manifesting our reality. So if you're walking around saying life is terrible and everybody's against me and things suck and I don't like it, well, then there's your experience. And you have literally created that for yourself. So it's a trick. It's paradoxical and it's weird at first. It's counterintuitive. But if you were to just do the opposite and say, I love life and I am grateful and everybody's for me and, I love myself, that may be a stretch for some people. The loved one's a little tricky. Someone told me once that I have a self-worth issue. And I said, I don't believe that. And they said, then go in the mirror and look yourself in the eye and say, I love you. And I did, and I bawled. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, now I know. And so I've been practicing that because that means that for all these years, I've been subconsciously telling myself that I hate myself. I don't love myself, or I wouldn't have had an emotional reaction. Like I said, your emotions are all keys to let you know the story you've been internally, subconsciously telling yourself all these years. So I would challenge everybody, and I think I did this last time, and I wonder who did, to say, just find one. You are thinking things 18,000 times a day minimum. You are having 18,000 thoughts every single day. Can you just take one and turn it around? Because so Louise Hay says that everyone across the board, she has worked with thousands and thousands of people before she passed away doing this work. She said across the board, everyone thinks that they are not enough. That is systemic in our culture. That everyone has this underlying feeling of that they're not doing enough and they're not being enough and they need to be doing and being more. I would counter that as capitalism has trained us very well to believe that you are only valuable if you are productive and you only have worth if you contribute something tangible to the world. Well, I counter that my why is that existing is enough, being is enough. Me just being here is valuable. Me just being on earth. Whether I, go to a job or do what I'm doing, which I do. I got two. I'm contributing. I do good work, but that's what I'm doing. What I'm being that's as close as we can get to godliness if we can really take the words away from it and get to the ineffable part of who each of us is and what each of us is here, why each of us is here. So if you could at least say once a day in the mirror, or just think it when you're going around, I'm enough. I am worthy. I am complete. They say recently that there's no such thing as perfection. We've really gotten on a weird trail there because people are striving to some sort of perfection that literally does not exist. Doesn't exist in nature. Doesn't exist anywhere out there other than the view maybe that we've made of God. And I would say that would even be a surprise, hopefully at that aha moment we get at the end. Ooh, fingers crossed. We get some sort of clarity on that one. I would say that even that lacks perfection. What we're really striving for is wholeness and completeness. You are already complete the way you are. And you are already whole when you came into this world whole. And this world has put holes into you to tell you that you're not enough and that you are flawed and sinful. I heard a pastor one time say that sin really is translated into brokenness. But it's not a matter of being evil. It's a matter of being broken by the world. And that it's then, therefore, our personal responsibility to do something about that, It's not that you can bubble wrap yourself up and never not get broken. It's a little late for that. But it's to be able to know how to mend ourselves, to know how to stand up and say, I am still okay. I am whole. I am complete, regardless of anything that this world has to experience us. So to go even a little further, the law of manifestation and the law of attraction, which I recommend looking into if you haven't heard of this before. It's a plethora of a rabbit hole to go on the internet down. The law of attraction, they say, is a law like gravity is a law. It's happening whether you believe in it or not. It's always happened. That your thoughts and your words attract like things. It's similar to electromagnetism, how magnetic things, pull each other to each other. That your thoughts are a vibration at a certain frequency, like color is or like sound is, and that by putting out a particular frequency with a thought, you are attracting more of those things. So if you're putting out thoughts of hate and self-loathing, then you're going to get experiences that corroborate that vibration. The universe is not sentient enough to say, oh, I can decipher what it is you're talking about. No, it's just matching vibrations. So if you're sending out low vibrations of, discord, here, have some more. That's what you must want. If you can change that just for a second and send out a positive vibe to say, even if you're faking it, to say, well, I'm enough. I love myself. I am good. That starts to send a different trend. You're putting out a different vibration then. And I mean, really to think about this, I know when I use the word vibration, it gets a little weird there, but to think about the fact that your heart is a generator, you are literally vibrating. Nothing is solid. This desk isn't solid. It's all just molecules and atoms that are moving fast enough that I can't put my hand through it. Same with your skin. But you are a constantly regenerating, growing, vibrating being. You put out a frequency, everybody does. Plants do, rocks do. That's non-negotiable. Science knows that now. It's not like a heady oh, we're all vibrations. No, really, your heart is pumping in such a way that you are putting out some sort of, field. And that therein lies your power, that you are a vibratory being in a vibratory universe. And it's all just frequencies matching frequencies. It's all, so it can either be a harmony and a chord, or it can be discord and sound terrible or feel terrible. That's what I mean when I say your emotions are keys to what your experience is. If you feel bad, it's because your vibrational is out of alignment with the things going on around you. And then, I don't know, that's a different segue. I digress. I get really excited about that one. I'll bring it back. To say that if you can just for a minute put out a different vibration, if you're going around with feelings of unworthiness, if you can just once a day out of your 18,000 thoughts go, I am worthy. Whether or not you believe it at first, that's progress, And if you can do that every day, I'd say in a month's time, it becomes habit. All of these things are habits anyway. Who you are is just all the habits you've accumulated from your lifetime. So you now have the opportunity to intentionally make yourself whatever kind of habits you want. If you would like to stay in the habit of thinking that you're terrible, well, then by all means, I'm not here. That's free will. I'm not here to tell anybody not to. I'm just saying you get the choice. It's all about what you want. So if you want to think something better, well, go ahead, try it. Just once a day, catch it. That's why awareness is kind of important, because you have to be aware of what you're thinking to begin with. That's why your emotions can help you, because if you feel bad all of a sudden, that's a key to go, hey, what was I just thinking about? If all of a sudden your mood changes, instead of going about going, I'm just having a terrible day, try to stop as soon as you can when that feeling begins to go, hey, where was my thoughts at? What was I thinking? I bet you can come to something that you've been subconsciously thinking 1,000 times a day for years, and you can go, oh, I was thinking that I'm not good enough to be here, or I'm not, who people think I am. And then you stop and you catch that thought and you go, you know what? I am good enough to be here. And I am who I want to be. Anything you want, just change it. I call it countering. Just pick one, make it a positive thought. After a month, I promise that has now started to become a habit. And then you can find more and more and more and more. I have been told that I come off as a pretty positive person. I don't think that I thought that true of myself until even recently, because of the story that I had told myself for such a long time. And because my brain was a very uncomfortable place to be, because I was unconsciously thinking terrible things about existence and my life and the world and everything. So it was like I chose to trick myself. I was a hopeless person. And I said, well, if I get one life, then I might as well choose to try to be happy. What's the worst that could happen? And here I am. I think that I come off as pretty happy most of the time. And more importantly, my brain is a much more peaceful place to exist in. I am not self-sabotaging. I'm not thinking terrible things. I'm not constantly like twitching at negative thoughts that are just like running default, that probably like my parents put there or their parents put there, kids in elementary school that I've just all this time and going, and until you really sit down with yourself and think about it, you don't even know where those came from. So why am I here? I'm here to at least promote my own better internal experience, and have been really called to just try to share that with people, because I feel like A, it's a trick. B, it's really widely like available knowledge at this point. Like a lot of information is available about it, like online and out in the world, and a lot of people understand it now. They say like all the really wealthiest people in the world understand these things, these concepts of the law of attraction and The Secret, that like once you know what you're thinking and you're aware of your thought processes, and then you do something to alter it, and then you just trust and believe that like things are going to work out after that. Like, because that's the thing too, is you can't, this is where why and how are different. We can talk all day about why, and we can really delve into it, but how is kind of out of our control. We can think till we're blue in the cheeks about how, but according to law of attraction, you have to let that go and you have to allow it. Because think about the things that you've accomplished in your life. Could you have thought when you desired that thing, could you have planned the how of how you got to where you are now? Anything that you've ever accomplished, if you look back on it, did it happen how you've planned it to happen? Usually not. It usually comes out of some side way that you're like, oh, I never could have known that so-and-so was going to introduce me to so-and-so, and that would lead me here, and that would lead me to where I'm at now. So when we really have to let the how go, according to law of attraction, because you'll only trip yourself up going, well, I can't see how I'm going to get there. Well, you don't have to. All you have to do is know what you want and trust that you can get there. I wanted to be happy. I didn't know how that path was going to go or what that was going to look like, but I can say that I'm happy now. And I couldn't have said that 10 years ago. I couldn't have said that 5 years ago. It's been a long journey, and it's been a lot of internal awareness and intentional altering. But like, you are the curator of your own thoughts. Like, your mind is a garden. You can plant flowers or you can plant weeds. And what then you harvest what you sow. And there's a thing too that like, you don't get to eat the fruit the same day you plant the seed. So you can't rush the process either. You can't go, well, I was thinking positive things for 3 days and nothing's changed. No, you just have to trust that it's just a tiny little step and a tiny little seed in the right direction. And what's the worst thing that can happen than taking a moment, literally a split second every day, to go, I'm going to change this thought and think something nice about myself instead. Nobody gets any control over what you think about you other than you. And if you've been giving that control away to other people, I think it's time to stop now. We are all adults here. You all have the authority over your own life. You have the authority to listen to your own knowledge that comes to you. So long we have thought that we are brain-based creatures, but they've realized recently that we actually have 3 brains. Your heart has almost as many neurons as your brain does, and so does your gut. And this is a 3-part system. That's why you can have a gut feeling or feel something from your heart. We have given all of our authority over to our brain, which is processing everything that we're experiencing from the world. I think the gut processes a lot of our ancestral knowledge that we're trying to hear. And our heart, I don't know, is like the lighthouse. If we can start listening to and believing our own internal knowledge from our heart and our gut more, not to say tune out the brain, it has a lot of good things in there, but that it's not the sole authority over ourselves. We are a much larger experience than just what this little 7-pound mass seems to say, 3 pounds maybe, has to say about what we're experiencing in the world. Even the fact that reality is relative to the fact that what I'm saying to you now, you're getting and hearing like a split second after I'm saying it. That anything you see and experience, you're not seeing and experiencing in real time because it has to process through your organs, through your sight, through your sounds, through your touch. And so it takes like part of a second to even get through what you're doing. And then your brain has to filter a lot of it out. So nobody's ever experiencing all of true reality because your head would explode. You couldn't do it. So the fact that all of reality is a little subjective and a little time lagged anyway, I don't know, just sometimes that's a trip to go, well, if I'm just a couple organs that's experiencing sensations and input from the world, well, maybe I should listen to what's happening inside a little bit more than trusting everything that's happening outside. Why are we here? Did we come here to like go to work and make money and pay taxes and die and be fertilizer? I think that we came here to change things. I think each one of us came here with a purpose. And it doesn't have to be that you came here to change the world, but it can be that you came here to love yourself and your family, and you came here to pave a better way genetically for those who come after you. When I started doing this work, I distanced myself from my family a little bit because they were very, very negative and sarcastic people, and I didn't really thrive in that environment. And I think for a long time I tried to change them because it's always easier to see the flaws in someone else than it is to see in ourselves. And so I moved far away from home and I worked on myself. And without even trying, here my family is all having their own experiences and their own awakening. And my father, who was the most hard-pressed to say I love you or to experiencing anything other than a snide comment, is now making so much progress. I'm so proud of him every day that he's understanding why he is. He's mending his relationships with his brothers that he hadn't spoken to in decades. That one day they hadn't spoken in 20 years. It was over money, some typical Jewish thing. 20 years they hadn't spoken. They came together and they cried and they held each other because they had both made enough progress to know that that was valid and that was what needed to be done, regardless of what anybody else in that restaurant thought, because their own internal authority system told them that that was the way. And here we are, a family again. And everyone in my family is making progress. And I didn't do that. I just did it to myself, allowed myself to be who I was, even though those were the people most telling me that I shouldn't be who I was, that I was weird and I was broken. I followed my own system regardless. And now those people are loving themselves more and they are more who they were here to be. And they see that now and they recognize that. And my sisters have children and I'm excited for who they get to grow up to be now because they have a family who can do that for themselves and for each other. Be authentic, So much of what culture has taught us is to be fake, to not honor what we are experiencing because it's not status quo and it's not, normal. Well, that's all really subjective and that's just a word anyway too. So it's all arbitrary and you get to pick, you get to choose whatever you want to believe. So I challenge you to start realizing what you're believing about yourself, challenge it, and believe whatever you want to believe about yourself, which I hope is something positive. I hope you haven't been damaged enough by this world that you think that you deserve to believe negative things. Choose, try, just a little bit every day. Trust that with time, it'll show, you'll see that it works. It takes time. Don't lose hope after a week. Keep doing it. Do a gratitude journal, write them down, whatever. I hang them on little Post-its on my mirror so I don't forget to tell myself, because I'll put it off too. I'll go, I don't need to do it. Yeah, I do. I still need to tell myself I'm enough and I'm worthy. My last name is Freed. I find that's the thing I have to tell myself the most, that I deserve to be free, that I am free. I should tell myself that every day. This is a good reminder to do so. We are all here for a why. I hope each of you find it before the end of your days, or that when you die, you get to go, oh, I get it now. I know why. But I challenge you because I don't think there's an easy one-word answer. Obviously, it would take me much more than an hour to ever begin to talk about it. But please, Just acknowledge that your why is worthy, and that society and culture and anybody around you can't give you that answer and never has been able to. Your authority is valid. Your intuitional system is important. And it's time to start tuning in and hearing what you have to say to you, and then writing whatever story you want. Like, whys are the morals. What is the moral of your life going to be? It's whatever you want. I can't say, but I would. I'll talk about it all day, but I won't. I'll stop there. That seems about right. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or?